At my sister's wedding, she humiliated me in front of everyone, saying, "This is my sister who couldn't even afford a bridesmaid dress, so I let her wear my old one." Her bridesmaids snickered, and one said, "Charity really does start at home." Hours later, my son grabbed the mic and said something that left everyone gasping. What happened next was, I 42 female have a younger sister, Cordelia 35 female. We're both originally from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Grew up in a 2-bedroom duplex with our mom and dad, though dad was more like a weekend roomer. It was mostly just the three of us. Cordelia was always the pretty one. That's not bitterness, just facts. Even as a kid, people would stop my mom at the grocery store to tell her Cordelia should be in commercials. She got attention, praise, gifts from relatives I barely remembered. I was the quiet, chubby older sister with her nose in library books and a second-hand backpack that smelled faintly of mildew. Life didn't soften any of that. She breezed through college on scholarships and internships, landed a high-paying job in digital marketing, and eventually moved to Chicago where she started dating Royce, her now husband. He's one of those guys who smiles with his teeth but not his eyes, if that makes sense. He sells luxury real estate and seems to always be networking. The kind of man who says synergy unironically. I, on the other hand, got married young to a man who turned out to be more committed to his vices than his family. We divorced when Julian was 6. I've been raising him alone ever since, juggling part-time jobs, freelance work, and praying the car survives another winter. Some weeks I get by with just enough to cover the rent and gas. Still, I was happy for Cordelia when she called to say Royce had proposed. She was over the moon. Giggling like a teenager. I congratulated her, of course. Even offered to help with planning. I truly wanted to support her. Then came the bridesmaid dress conversation. She called one day in March, "Boy's sugary sweet. I found the perfect solution for your outfit," she said. "You can wear my old bridesmaid dress from Belinda's wedding. I know things are tight for you. No pressure to buy a new one." I blinked. She didn't ask me my size. Didn't offer to buy me a new dress. Just assumed. Assumed I couldn't afford it, I couldn't, and assumed I'd be grateful to wear her hand-me-down, I wasn't. Still, I said thank you. Because I didn't want to make things difficult. And maybe, in a twisted way, I thought it would show her I was supportive, even if it meant swallowing a bit of pride. The dress arrived in a UPS bag. No note, not even a hanger. Just a faded pink gown with a stain near the hem and that unmistakable scent of someone else's life. Julian saw it and said, "She wants you to wear that?" I smiled. It's not that bad. But it was. The wedding was at the Langham in downtown Chicago. Fancy place. Marble floors, velvet drapes, valet parking. I felt out of place the second I walked in. The other bridesmaids were already gathered, laughing and sipping from champagne flutes, each of them in deep plum gowns that looked tailored to fit their exact curves. And then there was me, in a dress 2 sizes too tight, with a drooping strap and a patchy stain I tried to cover with a corsage. Cordelia didn't even say hi when she saw me. Just gave me a once-over and said, "Good, you got it steamed." I hadn't. I didn't have the extra $20. I just hung it in the bathroom while Julian showered for a week hoping the wrinkles would fall out. The ceremony went by in a blur. I was mostly just trying not to cry. I kept thinking, at least no one will really notice. At least I can fade into the background. But then came the reception. During the speeches, Cordelia stood at the front of the ballroom, glowing in her custom gown, and began thanking everyone. Her voice carried smoothly over the sound system. People laughed in all the right places. And then, she said it. And this, she gestured toward me, is my sister, Alina. She couldn't quite afford the bridesmaid dress, so I let her wear my old one. I froze. There was a pause in the room. Then a few awkward chuckles. And then, loud enough for everyone to hear, one of her bridesmaids muttered, "Charity really does start at home." The table erupted in laughter. I wanted to vanish. I didn't say a word. Just quietly sipped my water and stared at the candle in the center of the table. Julian looked at me with wide eyes. "Mom," he whispered, but I shook my head. "It's okay," I said. "Let it go." But it wasn't okay. That humiliation clung to me like sweat in the summer. For the rest of the evening, I stayed on the sidelines. I watched my sister dance, smile, twirl, bask in attention, while I hovered at the edge of the party like a shadow that didn't belong. Then, sometime during the father-daughter dance, I noticed Julian wasn't at the table. My stomach twisted. I scanned the room. He wasn't at the food table, not near the restrooms, not at the coat check. Then I saw him. At the DJ booth. He was saying something to the guy, who was looking at him with a shrug. And then, just like that, the music stopped. There was a moment of static, then Julian's voice came through the speakers. "Hi, my name is Julian. I'm Alina's son." Heads turned. Conversations halted. I froze in my chair. "I just want to say something about my mom," he continued. "She didn't want me to. She'll probably be mad at me later." But I saw her face when Aunt Cordelia made that joke. The room was stone silent. My mom works harder than anyone I know. She cleans houses in the morning and delivers groceries in the evening. Some nights, she comes home so tired she falls asleep in her uniform. And she still helps me with my algebra. Still makes me pancakes on Saturdays. Still smiles even when I know she's struggling. I could feel my face burning. I didn't know whether to cry or run up and stop him. "She didn't tell anyone," he said, "but she sold her wedding ring to afford the gas and hotel to come to this wedding. She did it because she loves you, Aunt Cordelia. Even after everything. Even when you treat her like a joke." A woman at the front put her hand to her chest. Someone dropped a fork. Cordelia's face was frozen. Julian finished, "I just wanted you all to know that my mom isn't a charity case. She's a hero. And I'm proud to be her son." The mic clicked off. Silence. Then, quietly, almost awkwardly, a few people clapped. Then more. And suddenly the entire room was clapping, slowly, almost unsure. Cordelia's expression was unreadable. Her mouth opened slightly, but she didn't say anything. I didn't move. Julian came back to our table and sat down. "Sorry," he whispered. I couldn't let that go." I didn't respond. I was too stunned. Too full of emotion. And too proud. The rest of the night passed in a strange haze. People started approaching me, people I barely knew. Distant relatives, college friends of Cordelia's, even Royce's mother. One woman, in a glittery navy dress, leaned down and squeezed my hand without saying anything. Another murmured, "You raised a good boy." I nodded, thanked them, but I wasn't really there. My head was still reeling from Julian's speech. From the fact that, in a room full of people who wouldn't have noticed if I quietly disappeared, my son had stood up and made them look at me. Not in pity. But in truth. Cordelia never said anything that night. Not even when we passed her on the way out. She was standing with Royce and a group of his co-workers near the bar, her mouth tight, her hands clutching a champagne glass like it might shatter. We didn't stay for cake. Julian and I slipped out early, while most of the guests were dancing to a live band that played 80s covers like it was their full-time gig. Back in the rental car, I started the engine but didn't pull out right away. Julian sat beside me, unusually quiet. I think even he realized the weight of what he had done. His fingers twisted the hem of his suit jacket nervously. "I didn't mean to embarrass you," he said finally, his voice low. I turned to him. "You didn't embarrass me, Julian. You did something I never had the courage to do." He looked over, and his face crumpled a little. "I just didn't like the way she talked about you. Like you were, less." I shook my head, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "I don't care what they think anymore. I care about you. And that was the moment, sitting in a quiet garage beneath a luxury hotel, the sound of muffled bass echoing through concrete, that I realized something deep and permanent had shifted inside me. I had spent years trying to be the good sister. The accommodating one. The family glue. Even when I was hurting, even when I was overlooked, I thought, just be patient. Just stay kind. Maybe one day she'll see you. But that night, my son saw me. And that mattered more than anything Cordelia ever could have given, or taken, from me. We drove back to our modest Airbnb near Logan Square, a tiny apartment over someone's garage, with creaky stairs and a broken faucet in the kitchen. I let Julian take the big bed. I curled up on the futon and lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily overhead, unable to stop reliving the moment he took the mic. The silence afterward. The faces. The next morning, I woke up to a message on my phone from Cordelia. "Can we talk before you leave town?" I stared at it for a long time. Then locked the screen and slipped the phone into my bag. Back home in Cedar Rapids. The house felt smaller but safer. My kitchen was still missing a cabinet door, and the water heater still made that gurgling sound when it kicked in, but it was ours. It was warm. Familiar. Julian went back to school that Monday like nothing happened, only mentioning the wedding once to say, the meatballs were decent. I thought maybe that would be it. That Cordelia would go back to Chicago and pretend nothing happened. That she'd move on in her polished circle, and I'd return to my routine of meal planning and laundry and coupon clipping. But 3 days later, she called. I didn't answer. Then came a package. No return address, just a box left on my porch wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a letter, handwritten, which already felt unlike her, and a stack of photos. Old ones. Us as kids. Matching Easter dresses. Me reading her a book on the porch. Her asleep with her head on my lap. The letter was short. I watched the video again. I didn't realize how cruel I sounded. I'm ashamed. Not just of the joke, but of how little I've seen you all these years. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. No excuses. No defensive jabs. Just that. I stared at the photos for a long time. Later that night, I showed them to Julian. He looked through them slowly, pausing at one where I was holding Cordelia on my hip, both of us grinning like we didn't know what resentment was. She used to follow me everywhere, I said, surprised by the ache in my throat. Julian handed me a picture and said, I think she still wants to. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. Because the thing about family is, it's not just about shared blood. It's about shared history. And that's a harder thing to leave behind than people think. The following weekend, Cordelia called again. I let it go to voicemail. Again. This time, she left a message. Her voice was different. Softer. I'm coming to Cedar Rapids next week. I'd like to stop by. Just for coffee. If that's okay. No pressure. Just, please let me try. Julian heard it. He looked at me and said, Are you gonna let her? I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't know. And I still don't. The week crept by slower than usual. At work, I found myself zoning out more than I should. Folding towels at the hotel where I cleaned rooms, I'd drift into old memories, sleepovers with Cordelia where we made pillow forts and whispered about our future husbands, giggling at nothing. Then, in the same thought, the wedding replayed like a tape I couldn't pause, her laughing into the mic, the bridesmaids' smug smiles, the clink of champagne glasses echoing after that awful joke. Back home, I scrubbed the floors like I was trying to erase the shame. I kept telling myself I didn't need closure. That her words didn't matter. But the truth was, Cordelia had always mattered to me. That was part of the pain. Julian didn't push me, but I knew he was watching me carefully, waiting to see what I'd do. He didn't talk about the speech again. He wasn't the type to fish for praise. But every so often, I'd catch him looking at me like I was different now. Stronger, maybe. And that broke something tender in me. Then Thursday came. Cordelia texted just before 10 a.m. leaving Chicago now. Should be there around 3. Just text me your address when you're ready. Or not. Totally your choice. I stared at the message for a solid 5 minutes. I hadn't even told her where we lived. Part of me wanted to delete it and go about my day. The other part, a deeper, quieter part, opened a new message and typed out my address, hands trembling the whole time. She responded with a simple, "Thank you. I'll bring coffee." Julian was home from school by the time she arrived. I had just finished wiping down the kitchen counters again, for the 3rd time. I didn't know what I was doing. It wasn't like she hadn't seen worse. Our childhood home had cracked linoleum and a kitchen sink that coughed up rust. Still, I'd cleaned the whole house like it was about to be listed for sale. When she pulled up, I could see her through the front window, parking a sleek silver Lexus at the curb. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before getting out, holding a cardboard drink tray and a small brown paper bag. She knocked lightly. Not the old rhythmic double knock she used to do when we were teens. Just tentative. Unsure. I opened the door. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She looked different. Not worse. Just smaller. Like the layers of perfection had thinned. Her hair was still in a polished bun, but wisps escaped at her temples. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her eyes were tired. Human. I brought coffee. And lemon scones. I remembered you liked those. I stepped aside and let her in. Julian popped his head out of the hallway and gave a small wave before disappearing back into his room. We sat at the tiny dining table, barely big enough for 2. I took a sip of the coffee. It was lukewarm but tasted decent. She cleared her throat. "I've rewritten this conversation about 100 times in my head," she said, offering a small laugh that didn't quite land. It never came out right. I didn't say anything. Just waited. She looked down at her cup. "I was horrible to you. At the wedding, yes. But not just then. 4 years. I think I used to justify it by telling myself I was just being honest. Or playful. But I was cruel. I know that now." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "Why now, Cordelia?" She looked up, eyes shining with something raw. "Because I heard my nephew stand in front of 200 people and tell the truth. And I realized I haven't told the truth in a long time. I've been so busy pretending I have it all together. I forgot how to be real." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me felt like she was rehearsing lines again. But another part believed her. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the table. "This is the money from the wedding gift you gave us. I'm returning it. I know it probably came from something important. I had no right to accept it." I didn't touch the envelope. Just stared at it. Cordelia fidgeted. "And about the dress?" I thought I was being helpful. I really did. But I realize now that I was trying to keep you small. Because if I had to face how strong you are, how much you've endured, I'd have to admit that I don't really know what strength looks like. She paused, waiting for me to respond. I didn't. She continued, softer now. "I wish I'd stood up for you the way Julian did. I wish I'd been the kind of sister who made you feel proud instead of ashamed. I was jealous of you, you know. All this time. You never let life break you. And somehow I turned that into a punchline. I let that sit there. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't forgive her, not yet. But I saw her. For the first time in years, maybe." We sat in silence for a while after that. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator and a car passing outside. Eventually, Julian came out and sat on the couch. Cordelia glanced at him, but didn't push conversation. She just looked down at her coffee and said, "He's amazing." I nodded. "He is." Another pause. "I'd like to come visit again. Maybe get to know him better. If that's something you'd be okay with." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the chipped edge of my mug and thought about everything that had been broken between us, and whether anything could really be fixed. I wanted to believe it could be. But I wasn't sure. Not yet. Cordelia didn't stay long that day. After we finished the coffee and the scones, which were surprisingly fresh, she stood up, brushed imaginary crumbs off her dress pants, and gave me a long look at the door. Not hopeful. Not pleading. Just uncertain. "I'll wait to hear from you," she said. And then she left. For a couple weeks, I didn't do anything. No messages. No calls. I tucked the envelope she gave me into my kitchen junk drawer without opening it. Every time I passed it, I thought about all the years I'd spent being the bigger person, swallowing her jabs and shrinking myself to keep the peace. Then, something shifted. Maybe it was the way Julian walked around taller now, like he knew he'd done something important. Maybe it was how quiet my house felt, like a space that had finally expelled a long-held tension. Or maybe I'd just finally reached a point where I realized that I didn't need Cordelia in my life in the same way anymore. But I could decide what part, if any, she'd play in it. So I made a plan. Not for revenge in the usual sense. Not to hurt her. But to let her feel, just once, what it was like to be publicly seen in a way that stripped away all her polish and pretense, without cruelty, without malice. Just clarity. 3 weeks later, I got an email from a local radio station. They were running a Mothers Who Inspire feature ahead of Mother's Day and had picked me from a nomination Julian had submitted. It was simple. I'd come on for a short segment and talk about raising a child as a single mom. A few producers had read Julian's wedding speech, which he'd posted anonymously to a parenting forum that went viral after someone shared it, and thought it was worth amplifying. I was nervous, of course. But Julian talked me into it. "It's your story, Mom," he said. "Why not tell it your way?" So I did. On the day of the segment, I sat in the small studio across from the host, mic in front of me, heart hammering in my chest. I wore my best blouse, applied some mascara, and tried not to cry as I talked about raising Julian, working long hours, losing everything after the divorce, and still choosing to show up with love, even when it wasn't returned. I didn't name Cordelia directly. But I mentioned the wedding. The dress. The humiliation. And what my son did. The host was silent for a long moment before saying, "That must have been hard." "It was," I replied. But it also reminded me that I wasn't invisible. That even when you feel dismissed, kindness leaves a mark. And sometimes, the people you think are walking all over you? They're just waiting to fall. The segment aired the following week. It wasn't dramatic. But it was powerful. The radio station posted a clip on social media. It got picked up by a few other platforms. Comments poured in. People started messaging me, women, mostly, saying they'd had sisters or mothers or partners who'd made them feel small. That my story made them feel seen. 2 days later, a local magazine called and asked if they could do a photo shoot and write up for a Mother's Day piece. I agreed, though I nearly backed out when they asked for a before and after shot. They wanted something real, they said. Something that showed what it looks like to hold your head high after being stepped on. That's when I got an idea. I pulled out the faded blush dress. I had Julian take a picture of me in it, arms crossed, face expressionless, standing against a blank wall in our living room. Then, I changed into a new dress. Something I'd bought with a gift card from one of the hotel guests I cleaned for. Navy blue. Simple, but elegant. I added a pair of earrings I'd had since high school and took another photo, this time smiling, eyes forward, standing on the porch in the sunlight. I sent both in. The article ran the next week. The title? From hand-me-downs to holding her head high, A single mom's quiet strength. It went semi-viral. Even people in Chicago saw it. Including Cordelia. I know this because she texted me the day it dropped. I saw the article. It was beautiful. Also, I recognized the dress. Ouch. I stared at the message for a long time. Then typed back, "You dressed me for humiliation." I just repurposed it. No response. A week later, she sent me another message. This time, it was different. "I understand if you don't want me in your life. But I'm proud of you. And you were right. Love did start at home. I just didn't know how to recognize it back then." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because revenge didn't come through cruelty or confrontation. It came through transformation. It came through being seen for who I really was, not the poor sister, not the charity case, not the quiet girl in the faded dress. But the woman who rose anyway. And best of all? Julian saw it too. That was enough. That was everything.